Hi, this is Rick for EDU Mobile Academy. I wanted to do a couple of demos on how to set up navigation interfaces and also modal interfaces before we jump into the actual demo code. So this one will be on setting up a simple application with a navigation push. So let's go ahead and start. I want a single view application, first of all, and this is an iOS application to which I'm going to add a WatchKit target. So when I start, and we've done this before, but let's call this nav demo, and we'll click next. And the language is Swift. We'll create it. And now we want to add a WatchKit target. So we'll go File, New, Target, and select WatchKit app from our iOS Apple Watch area. Click Next. And then the language is Swift. We'll finish, and it will ask us if we want to activate Nav Demo WatchKit App Scheme. Yes, we do. So now we're ready to start. Now we'll go ahead and set up our storyboard, and that will be an interface.storyboard under Nav Demo WatchKit App. And we see that we have one controller already with a corresponding controller, which is called in our WatchKit extension interface controller. And we can see that by looking at our interface storyboard again, clicking on this controller, and looking at the property inspector or the identity inspector, and seeing that the class here is set to interface controller. We can name this anything we want as long as we have a matching class in our hierarchy here named the same thing. So we'll leave this one as interface controller, but we want to add here a new interface controller, and we'll do that by just dragging one out. And now we could use a segue here and make it a navigation segue or a push segue, but what I really want to do is add a couple of controls to my main interface. I'm going to add a label, and when we drop interface controls onto the scene in WatchKit, they are placed for us. We don't have constraints in the sense that we would with iOS development using iPhone or iPad. So I'm going to drag this out, and I'm just going to leave the labels text as a label. We'll set it in the init method of our interface controller. I'm also going to drag out a button, and this button will push a new interface controller. So in this case, I'm not using segues. We're just going to use the push the view controller onto the stack of this controller. So in this interface controller, I'm going to also add a label, and I'm going to populate that when we go out and push this controller through the context that I pass to the new controller. The last thing I need to do is make a new file here, and this is going to be a Cocoa Touch class, and it will be a WK interface controller class. I don't want to name it interface controller. I'll name it new controller or new interface controller just for simplicity here. I'll click next. I'll create the class, and now I'm all set to go. Also, in my storyboard, I need to make this interface controller's class be new interface controller. And I do that here again in the identity inspector by selecting the custom class field and typing new interface controller. There we go. So now we're pretty much set, at least as far as our interface builder storyboard goes. I'll save it. And now I'll go back to my initial interface controller. I need to set up an outlet for the label. I need to set up an outlet for this label. And then I need to set up an action method for the button to push this controller onto the stack. So let's go ahead and start doing that. So I need an outlet for the label on this screen, and I can just type IB outlet. And let's call it LB for label display. And we will make it a WK interface label. And we'll make it an optional but explicitly unwrapped. Now, I have some methods here that I could use to populate this label, but I think what I'll do is just in the init method, we have override init, and then I need to, when I go into init, I always need to call up to supers init. And then after that, I can simply set LB displays text. I need to use set text. And let's just put hello here, just for fun. All right, now I'm going to need an action method for the button. IB action. It'll be a func. It's a method. And we'll call this button push. In WatchKit, there are no arguments to a button action, so we can't get the sender of a button. All right, here we go. What do I want to do? I want to push controller with name. Now, our next controller, our new controller out here, does not have an identifier, so we don't know what controller to push. So I need to set in the attribute inspector, I need to set the identifier for this guy. So let's just call it new. Now I have a name. Back in my first interface controller, I can use new. I can use new as a string as the name. Now I also want to push out something that will let me populate that label in the new interface controller, and that will be the context. So let's make a string to push as the context. So we'll just say here let, and this really could be anything. We could get it from anywhere, but in the case of this, I just want to show you how to populate a context and then get something from that context. So this is going to be any object, but in this case, I'm going to push a string. So we're going to say let new string equal new, and we'll do that. Now our context can be new string. All right. Now we need to remember that this context is going to come across not as a string, but as an any object. All right, so let's go back to our interface storyboard, and we will wire up our interface controller scenes outlet and action. So the outlet is label display, and the action is button push. Okay. So now over here, we have our new interface controller. All right, so let's go to our new interface controller object, class, I should say. Awake with context is going to be where we can get the context that was pushed to this interface controller. So it says right here, configure interface objects here. Well, we need an outlet for that label that's on this screen. So let's just call this one new label. Again, IB outlet to flag that this is an interface builder outlet, var, and then we will call this LB new. And it is a WK interface label and explicitly unwrapped. And we'll wire that up here in a moment. Now we need to get our context back from what was passed in awake with context. We can see that this is an any object. So we need to get that string out of the context, or we need to cast it as a string. So let's just call this str, just for string. Sorry about that. Let str equal context as string. Okay, now that we have that string, we can say lbnew dot set text with str. Okay, so now that should populate the string there. The last thing we want to do is make sure that we have a nice title for the new interface. So let's just say set title, and we'll say new. All right, now we need to wire up the label here to its corresponding outlet. So let's do that. It'll be new, goes to the label. Very cool. So now we should be able to run. When we push the button, this will be populated with the new string, and this will also get populated, and we'll see a title here in the new screen. All right, so this got populated in the init method of our interface controller, our first class here. If we push the button, we're pushing a new controller, and we see that that got populated from the context. Now we can go back, and we have a navigation interface just like we would have in iPhone. Thank you very much.